Craftsman Days are here at Lowe's with big savings on the tools you need. Right now, get a free select tool when you buy the Craftsman V20 2-pack battery kit. Whether it's the backyard, the bathroom, or beyond, Craftsman has the tools to help you power through and get the project done right. Because DIYing is unpredictable, but your tools shouldn't be. Shop Craftsman at Lowe's today. Valid through 6/18 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast, but not just any episode, part 2 of M Hour with our dear friend Mandy Slutsker. Ooh, ooh. Hi, Mandy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for joining us for part 2. Mandy and I just recorded part 1 on her podcast, which comes out on Sundays. We talked the Valley. We talked a little Love Hotel briefly. What did we talk about? I'm already forgetting. Oh, Summer House.
Summer House, some Atlanta. We were just like bouncing all over the place.
Bouncing. So that's what this podcast is going to be too, because before we started recording, I was just telling Mandy it's been a real hard time for your Bish. And I'm going to do a bite-sized Bish to just kind of wrap things up for the season. But this is the season finale, folks. I know people are going to be super upset about that. But I just had some hard conversations with some of my team, my, doctors and my care team, and I need some time. I am not in a good place. I don't like who I have been when I am in this space, and I just need to get back to, self-care and resetting and all of that. So I hope you all enjoy this episode. I will do another, like I said, bite-sized Bish, kind of just like explaining some things and letting people know where they can find me on my breaks, but I also I feel like we started my season together and now we're going to end it. So I just think that's really sweet.
I think so too. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes. So, Mandy, you really came in clutch there were a couple things that have happened on some of these shows in the after shows that you were able to catch that we're going to talk about. So today what we're going to talk about the Valley because there's some really interesting things going on there. We're definitely going to talk Summer House. Especially we're going to talk about Imrul because I feel like the reunion was a little bit snoozy and it seemed like this should have been last year's reunion. Why is this year's reunion? But we did get some little interesting tidbits about Imrul. But the most important thing that y'all are going to be excited to hear is that I have convinced Miss Mandy to watch Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and she has.
You and my friend Jody, who gave me her Hulu password.
Oh,
anyone
good.
who works at Hulu,
out.
you did not hear that. But we live on the same block, so I'm like, maybe they won't figure it out because we're like both on 12th Street, one block from one another.
Good thing their location services aren't pinpoint exacted. But I mean, listen, these streaming services, if I'm being honest, it's getting ridiculous. They're so expensive. And can I be honest? I feel like we're back to regular TV, right? We went from TV that was like DVR'd and you can just like fast forward. And now it's streaming services that unless you want to pay $30 a month for everyone, there's ads and there's, it's basically like television has come full circle.
So
except we're paying a lot more for it now.
I pay for no ads on Peacock. That's my
same.
That's what I use my ad money for the podcast tour.
But for us, that is honestly, it's so worth it because that's where all of our Bravo stuff is. And we watch so much of it, like I couldn't imagine the commercials. Now, Hulu, I do the commercials on Hulu because it was just too expensive to not. But sometimes I'm like, I understand why people just re-up and they just like take all of my money.
I do too. So I'm watching and the commercials have been totally fine. They've been for like gardening and like whatever. But a bunch of my friends who have Hulu said that like all of their ads have recently become from the Department of Homeland Security, like Kristen Doute and ICE.
What?
I was like, and they're like, literally none of my other ads are political or government related. Like my ad profile is, Fabletics and like Zara, like, and it's just like, it's very interesting. I was like, oh, that's not happened to me. But just like, I'm waiting to like, finally get to like episode 5 in the second season of like Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Yeah.
And it's like Kristen Doute being like, hi, you want to get deported? It's basically trying to convince people to like voluntarily leave the country and we'll be nicer about it.
Stop that.
Yeah.
You're
no,
joking?
I'm serious.
You're serious.
No,
You're not joking?
Yeah, I thought it was a joke too. And I was like, no, they wouldn't. And they're like, No, they're literally trying to convince people who are here undocumented that like just to come forward will be nice.
I'm not speechless often, but that's...
Oh, I can make you speechless again. There is also a concept being run around for a reality show, and it is in talks with the Department of Homeland Security to have a bunch of people compete to get a visa to live permanently or a green card.
Mandy, stop that
in the US.
right
No, I'm
now.
serious.
You are serious?
That doesn't mean that they're actually seriously considering it, right? But it is something that has been discussed. Obviously not greenlit, obviously not approved by the US government, but it is. Because I've always wondered with 90 Day Fiancé, like it feels really uncomfortable. Like
yes.
Some of it's interesting. Like you get to hear about the visa processes and you know, how it's different in different countries and all of that.
Sure.
But part of me is like, do you guys want this out there? You know?
That just seems like human rights violations all over you know, sometimes the world, I think part of what contributes to my space recently is like the world feels like we're being punked sometimes, but it's like it would be cooler if we were being punked because then that's just a joke. But then you find out stuff is real and you're like, cool, playing with people's lives who have families and like humans, you know, that's wild. But thank you for that tidbit because
well, if you want, you know, a more like salacious read that will make you feeling, I don't know how it'll make you feel, but there is a New York Times profile that came out yesterday on Elon Musk that talks about how he has bladder control issues from excessive ketamine use and goes into all of his baby mama drama. And it is incredibly well researched. Weekend reading.
Bladder cut is from...
Like, do you know how much ketamine you have to do in order to have that?
Actually, Mandy, I do. And that's why I'm laughing because, you know, I've treated drug and alcohol issues and I have not, like, I have heard pretty much everything in my career, right? Whether it's about substances, about human behavior, whatever. I've heard it all. I have never heard of that in real life. Like, I know that it can happen, but, you know, that's wild. That's wild. So,
it's
okay.
So crazy.
Enough about the craziness of the world because I'm sure
like,
everyone else is like...
Should he do like ads for Depends? Should he just like take over Lisa Rinna's role?
Maybe now Teslas, they'll come with like Depends in the seats or something. Who knows?
Right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's funny. I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said they were driving in Tesla and it said, "Don't blame me. I bought this before I knew Elon was like crazy or something," which I don't support that term, but like it was very funny. I was like, okay, I get it. They're like, please don't vandalize my Tesla. I bought it before we knew he was a wackadoodle. So anyway, enough about that, but that is very interesting. Thank you for all that. So today, like I said, let's just start with, I feel like
Mom talk.
You want to start with mom talk? Okay. All right. Mandy wants to start with mom talk. So that's what we're starting with.
I've been waiting for someone to talk to about mom talk.
Okay. Well, number one, here I am. And number two, something I have to tell you interesting is that in addition to our episode that's going to be released on Tuesday, I'm doing a bonus episode that I recorded with Caitlin Marshall. Do you know her? Besties by Caitlin?
It sounds really familiar.
So she's Besties by Caitlin everywhere, but she was featured on the show. She's a content creator who in the last episode of season 2, which you didn't see yet, because so Mandy, you watched the first season and then 2 episodes from season 2, correct?
Yes, that's where I'm at.
So my girl Caitlin, I was watching the finale of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives season 2, and I saw her. I was like, oh my God. I was so excited for her. I was like, this is amazing. I texted her immediately. I was like, I'm so proud of you. This is so sick. Like, how amazing. So I had her on my show and we talked about like all of these, like, what is mom talk and how did she get involved in it? Because she has had so much success in this lane that the people we're talking about have slid into her, not only her DMs, but into her comment sections. If you look on TikTok, Taylor has replied. Well, I don't want to say who because I don't know how comfortable she is, but there are many people from this multiverse that have reached out to her directly. And then she was on the show. And so we'll talk a little bit about, all of that. But like, I feel like you might even like to listen to that because she said a lot of very interesting things. There's
I would love
drama.
to as soon as I'm done. I'm actually saving. I'm like saving a number of podcasts about this because I don't like to listen to a lot of Bravo podcasts because I worry that it'll like change my opinions on things or make me think something's my opinion, but I actually heard it somewhere else.
I see.
And so I try really hard and then it's hard. And then when I do listen, it's usually like after I've already recorded or then eventually it's like multiple weeks old. So I've just sort of stopped listening to Bravo podcasts. Yeah. But when it's something like this, or what I do love listening to is interviews with Bravo people, right? So it's not about the last episode. It's not about like specific things, but it's them telling, it's more of like the after show, right? Where they're like telling more of their side of the story that's like a little less edited. I enjoy that.
Exactly.
But I am very excited to listen to all of the Mom Talk, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives podcast stuff. So that will be on my list as soon as I am done with the final episode of season 2.
Yeah. So, and the one thing that I want to point out that you really noticed is that it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of drama because of social media. It's like there's a meta-ness to the levels of the drama it's like each individual cast members have their own drama, but then there's offshoots because there's ex-husbands. The swinging scandal, a lot of people got divorced and then they're now with different people and it's a lot of moving parts. So for someone who's watched season 1 and then a couple episodes of season 2, hit it. What are some of the things that you have found the most interesting, the most bizarre, that stuck out to you the most?
Okay. So the most interesting thing is just people from Utah, not even just these people, but all people from Utah. I feel like Utah is the one, it's like the last part on earth, or at least in the United States, I should say, and I don't know about every other country, that is like uninfluenceable. That's probably not a word. But, we've got influencers and we've got trends. Like those trends will not make it to Utah. What matters in Utah is what's popular in Utah, not what's popular in New York, not what's popular in California, not what's popular anywhere else. And so they have things that are like cool there or normal there that are not cool or normal anywhere else, but they only care about the other people in Utah and what they think of them. And that is such a fascinating ethnographic study.
Right?
You know what I mean?
I told Kayla, it feels like a sociological experiment of the layers, right? Because it's not just Mormonism. It's Mormonism specifically in that part of Utah that you're mentioning. And then within that part of Utah, there's this one thing Kaylin explained is that there's this very interesting dynamic. Obviously, the Mormon church, there's a lot of patriarchal tendencies and teachings that underlie it. And so what will happen is these women, the men, they're like the head of the household because I guess that's what Jesus or Joseph, whoever said it, which I'm like, okay,
Jesus
wrong.
Probably
but
did not say that.
I'm sure not, but
I don't know a whole lot about Jesus, but
I don't either,
I
apparently.
would put money on the fact that Jesus did not say that the man is the head of the household and the woman must obey.
Right. She is the rib of Adam. I mean, that is a part of Catholicism. You learn that like the women are made from the rib of Adam, and it's just like, okay. But anyway.
No, it's the first part of the Torah. I mean, it's in the first, we call it like Parsha, but like the first chapter. Okay. It's in, Breshit, which means in the beginning. And it does say all of that, but it depends how you like interpret, right?
Sure.
And what, you're taught to learn about like, did this actually happen or is this a like story, right? That you can learn from.
Right. And so I think that to that point is that how do these people in Utah, in Mormonism, internalize and act out these messages that they've gotten? Because there are some that, just like with any organized religion, there are people who believe in being a good human being, loving thy neighbor, loving one another, being compassionate and kind. And that's a huge part of Mormonism for sure. But the part that we're talking about is these women who are in these very traditional relationships that what leads them to do these things like participating in MLMs, which is like multi-level marketing things, or, influencing is to make extra income for their families. And so that's kind of one thing that Caitlin and I talked about that I felt was really interesting. Absolutely. There's ethnography, there's like sociology, there's mores, and it's just the most fascinating thing, I feel like, for people, in that aspect. So such a good point. What else?
So what's interesting is that even though all are Mormon, that like difference between the sinners and the saints in the first season was really interesting, and who considers themselves a sinner and who considers themselves a saint, and what does that mean about them, and what does that mean about how they feel about themselves? All of them have the same teachings, yet some of the marriages seem to be equal partnerships. And some feel like they use the teachings to harm the woman, right?
And
or
control,
to keep her, or to control the woman.
Right. Yes. Yep.
And another thing is like any religion that is obsessed, or culture that is obsessed with like not divorcing, I feel like always has more divorce than like cultures that just like don't talk about it much. Like, I just think it's so interesting that they're all like, divorce is so bad, divorce is so bad. It's all against the church, and you can't, and like all of them like have gone through divorce. Like so many of them have gone through divorce. That's a large number of people to have gone through divorce. But it's also not shocking, because the earlier you get married, the more likely you are to get divorced, like statistically in the United States, because there's a lot of changes that happen between 20 and 30, especially more than between 30 and 40. And, there's the earlier you get married, the more likely you are to change, or, anything like that. But just this like obsession, and it's not just Mormonism. There's like parts of Christianity, and I'm sure maybe Judaism, I don't know, but that are just so obsessed with like, well, we don't believe in divorce. We don't believe in divorce. And it's always the people that don't believe in divorce that get divorced. And like, if we look at like my extended family on my mom's side, like no one's divorced, and no one talks about it. No one's like, because no one's like obsessed with like the marriage. It's just you marry someone you really like. You work really hard to make that partnership function. You put a lot of effort into the family, and you're not like saying like, these are all of our rules. You just like do it.
You just live an authentic life based on what makes you happy.
Yeah. It's just very odd to me that like obsession with not divorcing seems to lead to divorce.
Well,
at least from watching this.
To that point, though, is when you have a religion that is obsessed with perfection, not getting divorced, right? What I talked with Caitlin about was how human behavior, when you set humans up for failure, that is setting them up for failure, because there's no such thing as perfection. We talked about on part 1 of your podcast, my husband and I will be married for 15 years, together for 22. We met, I was 21 years old. I am 44 now. We've literally grown up together. And what I can tell you is that long-term relationships, number 1, are extremely hard work. They take work on both parts, his part, my part, and our part. And number 3, we've literally grown up together and have changed who we are so many times over. And I just want people to understand the level of commitment to each other that it takes to change who you are, to shed my skin. I've shed my skin probably dozens of times, and him too, and to still be in a happy partnership. That never happens by accident, and it doesn't happen by being shamed, guilted, or told you have to do things a certain way.
So shame is studied as one of like the most ineffective tools for behavior change.
1,000%.
I have a degree in public health, and when you talk about smoking and the dangers of smoking, you can tell people that smoking is dangerous, that it can lead to death, that it can lead to cancer. You can shame people and like force them to smoke in this like one secluded area, but like it doesn't lead that much to behavior change. The thing that leads to the most behavior change is actually an increase in taxes on cigarettes. That's the number one thing that makes people quit smoking. When it comes to HIV/AIDS,
otherwise known as a consequence, a consequence.
Financial. But when it comes to HIV/AIDS, like people would shame others' like sexual habits, and that just led to people being like further and further in the closet, and health professionals and just like refusing to trust and listen is just never effective. I mean, going back to the pandemic, shaming people for not using masks, not going to make them use masks. Like shaming me, like it's just not helpful ever. And
correct,
just the amount of which they try and use like shame as a societal tool of control.
Yes.
And I don't know how much is the religion versus like the people holding it up. And I also always wonder, because I feel like the patriarchy is held up by women sometimes, where it's like older women that are like, I had it this way, so you're going to have it this way. And this is the way that it goes. And like some of the men don't care. Right?
Mandy, that is such an important point I have to stop on for a minute, is that the women uphold the patriarchy sometimes the same, if not more than men. They're behind every terrible man will be some sort of woman supporting, right? Like, these serial killers, they go to jail. The women write to them. They get married in jail, right? All of these things. And so for sure, women participate in internalizing these misogynistic values, and they don't understand how they do it, especially I think older generations probably.
That's what I mean.
Less so now. Yeah. Which is a great cultural shift, because you're absolutely right. Shame and all that, everyone has shame, and giving people more shame, it's going to lead them to act out, which is why we have Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
And what I love about it is that there are people on there who are really trying to have discussions of sex and sexuality without shame. They haven't been exposed to conversations about sex, like growing up, like in a developmentally healthy way. So they giggle about it like they're children. Meanwhile, they're married and have like 3 kids. I'm like, you're giggling about this like fruity pebble like cereal thing and oral sex. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, you've given birth 3 effing times, like out of your vagina. Like, what on earth are we doing?
Mandy,
joking?
To that point, Layla had not had an orgasm with a partner, and how many kids does she have?
2 by that time. And I don't know if she's pregnant again or something, but
I think she just has 2 kids. But I think that speaks to the point that when we don't teach children about their bodies, about sexual health, about reproductive health, just about biology, kids will make lanes where they then make up these rules, right? When there's these religions that are creating these really unrealistic and unhealthy norms, because sex is a very healthy, very beautiful part of life and relationships, whether it's with yourself, with a partner. Sex positivity is a movement that I have always supported, but it's been a more recent thing. But I think that the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, it's what happens when you shame or make something ugly that's a perfectly natural part of humanity. It's not the soft swinging that's an issue. Who gives a shit? It's a Thursday night in New York City. No one cares if you're swinging. But the problem is that they did it without any discussions about enthusiastic consent, without any discussions about what are our rules and boundaries, and that's people who swing. That's all a part of those conversations. But then you have these basically young kids who are just having these urges that they're told are not appropriate, and then they act out with it, and it looks silly.
Now, my interest in watching season 2 is how much the women have changed or calibrated their behavior based on watching season 1. And my guess is that Whitney probably does the most changing of her behavior, because she was pretty awful to watch in season 1 and annoying as hell.
Well, just wait till you get to the end, hon.
Oh, God. We'll see. I mean, she was very frustrating to me. She's like the most, like the type of friend that does things like so that you check on them, when really like all you need in a friendship is for someone to reach out and say, hey, I'm having a really rough time. Like, do you want to go on a walk? This is what's going on in my life. But doing things to try and get that love and support from your friends that is actually harmful to them, that makes them feel bad, that's not the way to do it. And it's really manipulative to watch her maneuver. Watching Taylor not be pregnant is going to be really interesting, because I think she was so exhausted from her pregnancy and her relationship that she didn't have like the amount of fight in her that she has likely in season 2. And I'm really excited to see her fight. But I've also seen her express a lot of empathy because of what she has experienced. I did get to see that scene with her parents. That was the last thing that I watched. And that was, you know, I think Dakota is like one of the most manipulative people I think I've ever seen. He is, and I don't know if he's one of those people that knows he's being manipulative, but he makes it all about him. I don't think he knows at all. I really think he thinks that he's doing the right thing. But you are essentially so obsessed with making sure that this woman is succumbing to you and giving in to you.
Right.
Like, what on earth? She's pregnant. She's like going to have your child. And you just keep making everything about you. Like, it's not about you and your needs. And that's crazy. It's also, it's very clear. And this is like probably very controversial to say, but like, it's clear that like abortion is not only not okay, but it's not accepted like in any part of that culture, because at least 2 of the girls got pregnant in high school and then were forced to marry, like child brides, to marry their partner. I mean, at least Layla was 19, but like, I don't know about Michaela. I don't know how old she was.
And Macy was young, no, but she was still in her 20s. You're right. And
it's really wild to see and then Taylor getting pregnant with Dakota's child, and like no one, and I think it's the women, like I think they do not believe in it, which is 100% their right.
It's their body, their choice, right?
It's so clear that like that's not even a consideration, which leads me to wonder like why not use more protection? But then that also goes back to the fact that they're not taught about it.
They're taught natural family planning, which it's so funny you bring this up, because in season 2, I don't think you got there yet, but there was this one, well, I don't know if I should say. Well, are you okay with some spoilies?
I kind of want to be surprised.
Okay, fine.
Because I've been very surprised thus far.
Okay, fine. So there's one point where I'll just say Macy talks about someone's trying to get pregnant, and Macy talks about, well, if you're not protecting, you're not planning. She kind of used that phrase because in some religions, for example, when my husband and I got married, we were forced to do pre-Cana classes in the Catholic Church because we got married in the church, blah, blah, blah. And the message was basically, your job is to give your husband a child, which I couldn't. So I'm like, oh, cool. But I've heard that my whole life. So I just disregarded that. And then they talked about natural family planning, which is essentially it's just basically when your husband wants to have sex, you do that. And if you're married, you're not using protection. You're not really using any sort of contraceptives or anything to prevent a pregnancy. And you basically just like have to work around that for the Lord.
Yeah, I mean, in Judaism, it's similar. I mean, not in the type of Judaism that I practice. I don't know if all Orthodox people, but if you are like extremely observant, the way that the like Jewish law sets it up is that you share a bed with your husband when you're most fertile. So what happens is while you're on your period, you're not supposed to be sleeping in the same room as your husband. You separate from the marital bed. And then once you are done with your period, you go to a mikvah to have ritual purification to then re-enter the marital bed. But what happens by the time you're done with your period, you're getting close to ovulation. And so like that is why there are, a lot of Orthodox families have like many children, because it's like set up to get people pregnant.
And I think this is a similar situation that we're talking about in terms of like the mechanism of how you get there when maybe you don't want to have a bunch of children, but that's kind of how it happens.
Yeah, it's just interesting that they are like very open to modern medicine in certain areas and very anti in others. So like with reproductive health, it's sort of like, oh, we're not going to use all of these things that can prevent pregnancy that don't seem to be like against the I don't know, who knows, who might say, but like we're going to like, shoot up Botox. When you are 20 years old and you're shooting up Botox, like you are missing the point. The point is to like enjoy your 20-year-old skin. And when you're 40 or 50, try to get back to feeling like you're 30. It's not to like be 20. It's literally going to make you look older. that and the way that they wear their hair is insane. Why do people think that like having 4 feet of hair is hot? It makes you look like a doll, but like not a hot one. I think it's weird.
Well, I think it's so funny that you're saying this because the one thing I was like, that really frustrates me about the culture here is just like individualism is not supported and they all have the same like look and their houses all look exactly the same. They're same design, same color, the white with the natural wood, which again, have your home however you want it. But I think the part that frustrates me the most is that I see these women being so unhappy. No wonder, because you're living a life that's maybe not the one you want to live. You're living a life that's trying to please your God, that's trying to please your spouse, that's trying to please your parents, that's trying to please. And it just makes me feel like, well, no wonder why in season 2, we start to see some of these characters unhappy and unravel because it's just, I don't know any human that could be really happy under those scenarios,
In general, and that happens actually in a lot of things. Like it's not just a Mormon. I mean, I grew up in, Jewish family where we were conservative, and everyone else was a Jewish family that was conservative that I knew, and they all had 2 to 3 children, and they all did like all the same activities, all went to camp at the same place, all had the same after school stuff, all had the same, went to the same colleges, married the same kind of people. Anyone that does anything different, you felt like your kid was like bad or, and it's just, it's like that in so many parts of the country. I think that is actually not unique to Mormon culture. I think it's just, we can like visualize it so much because of like everything like looks the same. But I mean, I was just visiting a friend who has 2 boys and like there's so much time spent comparing children to other children and comparing families to other families and like, are you going to do this soccer league, this traveling soccer league or not? Or are you, how soon did your kid learn to ride this bike? Or like, there's like so much comparison that is baked into like our society that like,
society in general.
I'm like, why are you doing this? It's your kid. Like focus on your kid individually, not on how they compare to others. And if you're hanging out with other couples who are comparing all children and comparing families, like that's not the people you want to be friends with. That's weird. Like I know it's common, but it's not like healthy. Just like embrace everyone being like what I love about the Valley, and maybe this is a good segue, is how much Brittany embraces Cruz's individuality and all of the positive things that come with him being autistic and not coming at it from like a strengths-based approach and not weakness. And, I'm not one to like, shout out Lala Kent's podcast, but she did an episode with Brittany only. And at one point she was asking some questions. So it was questions that came in from fans. And one of them was asking about, what was the process in which Cruz got diagnosed? Like what were the first signs? Like those types of things. And she ends up talking about things I didn't know, like stemming, where Stimming. It's her accent.
Well, that's right. You're right. Okay, fair enough.
I couldn't understand word. Is that where you like put your arm like?
So stimming
like that.
That can be, but stimming is basically repetitive behaviors that help to regulate, and it's short for like self-stimulation, where when children process things differently, and basically, to be clear, children can have stimming behaviors that are not on the autism spectrum, because to your point, there is not just one way. To like children are looked at in the wildest ways in terms of that comparison piece that you mentioned, but stimming can essentially be, rocking back and forth, hand rubbing, flapping, things like that. And it's their way of helping self-regulate. But because it looks different than, what people like. And adults, by the way, can do this too. Like, so I'll share this. I do something at night where like I rub my feet together like a cricket and it makes me feel really relaxed and really calm. It's something I have done my entire life. I am not on the autism spectrum disorder according to the people that I have seen. And, of course, I was open to whatever I'm dealing with. But that's something for me that brings me a lot of joy and comfort. And so it can do the same for kids.
That's so
on the spectrum.
interesting. So it sounds like one of the things Cruz does is he puts his hand in his mouth and he kind of like bites on his hand. And he does it sometimes when he's a little anxious, but he also does it when he's excited. And so she was saying that like sometimes when he's excited, he'll like twirl in a circle. She's like, we'll be in line for something and he'll be really excited for whatever, I don't know if it's a ride or going to a movie or whatever. And so then he starts like spinning in a circle. And so then she says, I start spinning in a circle to like join him because like I never want him to think that like what he's doing, like that he's alone in it.
Right. Or that it's odd because
it's odd. That's what she was saying. It's not odd. Like and she's like, and if he's putting his arm in his mouth and like that's what he's excited about, then like I'll do it too. And it was so, and she also, Lala talked about things that Brittany had taught her, which is if you see some kids on the playground that are a little older and maybe would hang out on a playground, don't immediately assume that like they shouldn't be there or anything. You never know like what a child's, mentally or developmentally dealing with. And she also said she posted something on Halloween, like if a child doesn't say thank you, to like automatically assume that they're rude, that not every child is verbal, that not every child knows how to verbalize thank you. And we have this like, or if you see a kid trick-or-treating that seems a little too old to be trick-or-treating, like give them candy. Like it's not right. But it was just really, she's clearly learned so much and she's clearly teaching her friends so much and everyone around her so much. I am learning. I have friends who have children who are on the spectrum and I didn't know what stimming was, right? Like, for example, like there's things that we don't know. And I think Brittany is just doing such an incredible job showing the strengths of her child and advocating for her child and showing how to have like a really successful parenting experience with a child who is nonverbal and on the spectrum.
Right. And I think that Brittany, I don't know that I was ever, like I always liked Brittany, but I have to tell you with all of this stuff that not only she's done for her son, and not just for him, Brittany does things joyfully because she adores him. This is not for the public. It is not for podcasts. She legitimately loves this child more than anything in the planet. She wants him to be happy and healthy, whatever that means. And she is the most joyfully present, participative parent. And not only that, but she is doing such a service for the ASD community by making this just palatable information. It's not something that should be scary that we don't talk about. It is something that should be validated and normalized and understood. And her advocacy is just so, I've never seen anything like it. I've just never seen it. And I've become a huge Brittany fan for all those reasons. And I also think what people don't understand is the strength that it takes to do this for your child when you are dealing with a Jax.
Yes, that is the number one thing. I'm like, oh my God, she's dealing with so much of her own stuff and she is still centering her child and the child's needs. You said on my podcast that the most important thing when parents are going through a divorce is to love their child more than they hate each other. And she is an active, she actively practices that. She is frustrated with him. She is, annoyed. She is scared of him, all of the things, but doesn't let that detract her from focusing on his needs. And I feel like most of what we as society hear about autism is like how hard it is, right? Yeah. Like you're going to have such a hard time if you have a child that's autistic. It's so difficult. And I'm sure all that is true. Like it is a complicated thing. It is more difficult. But like we're not hearing about the positive things.
There's so much joy in it.
There's
too.
so much joy and positivity. That
joy.
Yeah.
And communication, by the way. People really do not understand that a lot of what encompasses communication is actually nonverbal.
Right.
And I think that going back to the Mormon wives stuff is that when society cements an idea, that's where the problem lies. Because children with, developmental issues, autism spectrum, whatever it may be, they are joyous. They are joyous, amazing little creatures. And, the bell curve that says what's normal versus what isn't is a very old concept. It's based on statistics. There's a lot of gaps in what we use to compare. So I love that you're pointing that out, is that Cruz is a beautiful human being. Children are just amazing little creatures that deserve the most love and support. And it's a shame that Jax can't do what he needs to do, but Cruz will never want for anything because of Brittany, I believe. I mean, she can't replace Jax, right? But studies show, and maybe this will help people, studies show that all children need really is one supportive, very loving, connected parent. They need one.
Or a caregiver. Like if it's a grandparent that lives in the home.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right. Meaning a caretaker, adoptive
primary
parent,
caregiver.
Thank you. The primary caregiver is the word I should have used. Absolutely, positively. And it makes my heart soar for Brittany and for Cruz. And I think that also has led her to understand her need to distance herself from Jax, right? Because when it's just her, it's like, she's like, well, I can tolerate that. But seeing her sweet, precious boy being subjected to this behavior, it changes that game for her. And I think if it weren't for Cruz, I don't know that she would have walked away.
I think that's the truth. I think she prioritizes him over herself all the time. And that actually ended up being positive for her to leave, something she needed to leave. I love watching how the other cast members on the show interact with Cruz as well, because it's clear that they see him all the time, that he knows them, that he loves them, that he's excited to see them, Seeing Zach and seeing Kristen, how he reacts to them is such a warm thing to watch. And I just, for all the faults of Kristen and
well, let's talk about that, because you had a point that we were talking about earlier that I wanted you to expound upon with Kristen.
Well, she said on the after show, which I think everyone needs to watch. It's the only after show that you really need to watch because it talks about things that aren't on the show and really explains them in more detail.
Tell people, where can they watch it? The after
on Peacock.
Show. On Peacock.
And you just go and you literally search for AFT and then it'll pop up. And that's how I get to it most times because I'm always confused how to find things on Peacock. I'm not great at streaming services and technology, but she said that she always needs a cause, like a social justice warrior kind of cause. And she doesn't mean that in a political sense, although I think she also does it for a political sense, in that she has to have a righteous cause. And this season, her righteous cause was Danny and Nia. And so she is going to battle for them. They have not asked her to go to battle. They are appreciating her. Danny, was like, I love Kristen, right? But
well, she's the only one defending him. I'm sure he does.
Right. And it's so interesting that her way of defending is digging up dirt on others and slinging it. It is such an interesting, it feels like Kristen's done a lot of work on herself and that she's a much more healthy, balanced person, but that these core parts of her, she just can't shake, which is if you, she's like, oh, I'm being a mama bear, I'm protecting. No, you're slinging mud. How is slinging mud at someone else? And it's such a stupid rumor, the thing about Jason. It's taking his ring off.
Such a snooze fest.
It's so not a thing.
No one believes that for 1 second. No one believes that.
It's such a dumb, they talk about it in more detail about where it might have come from and how Janet actually reached out to friends that Jasmine said it. And they were like, what are you talking about? And then they reached out to Jasmine and she's like, oh, Janet's making it a bigger deal. Janet's like, why would I start this rumor? All of it's very interesting that Kristen needs someone to stand up for. It's as if she finds people that she thinks are too little and too weak or whatever to stand up on their own, and she will be their voice and she will power through.
It's such a astute point because Kristen, I've always said this, when I did my interpretation of the Valley on Instagram, I think I called her a misguided empathic superhero.
Yeah.
Because that's how
I remember
that's how she sees herself, right? She sees herself as this Nia told her story, which, by the way, Nia's story of scarcity trauma, I think brought everybody to tears. I know it did for me. I've talked about on my podcast before the lengths of trauma that creates in young developing brains, right? So I won't go into all that again, but I could see in that exact moment, Kristen felt so much for Nia, which she should. You should, right? That's a lot. And then she vowed in that moment to make sure nobody hurt Nia again. But so here's where untreated trauma survivors, they go left. That's wacky. Like you can't, I want to support people and you want to do that too. But the way to do that is then not by doing underhanded things of bringing up dirt about somebody else. That's also like, I understand if you're bringing dirt up about, Jessie, which she won't because Jessie is her new ally, which also makes me question Kristen a little bit there. I get it, but like, it's like the friend of, what is that saying? The friend of my
friend, the friend of my enemy, or the enemy of my friend is my friend. No,
yeah.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's it.
There we go. Right. Boom, Mandy got it. And so that's what I think it is with Jessie, which is a little bit inauthentic to me. But at the same time, Kristen uses her empathic good stuff as rationalizations for shitty behavior. And that's what I don't like because it just makes her look bad. That just makes you look dumb.
But people are like all about it. I mean, maybe not. Janet is not well liked. And so her going after Janet is an easy target, like Janet and Jason. And Nia and Danny are very well, like Nia in particular. So people like Danny because of Nia. And so like in like the audience thing, I want to get your perspective on the whole Danny and his drinking and how Jason brought it up and how Danny reacted. And then Jasmine of it all and Danny and him talking to Jasmine and Melissa. Like, what are your...
Oh gosh, I have so many thoughts on that. So I think that what frustrates me with the Bravo fandom is that they are putting Danny on a pedestal and coming for Jasmine. And that is so fucked up and it's so backwards. So Jasmine has a very real, very important issue at hand, which is that society fetishizes lesbians. They do. Right. And I think that has a lot to do with the pornography that, a lot of straight men watch. People look at lesbians as, for example, Secret Lives of Mormon wives, too. They look at these hot women who, gay or not, and they're just like, oh, well, you're a swinger, you're a lesbian. Oh, let's have a threesome. And it's like, not all gay women want to have threesomes with your gross ass. Like, just because, like, that's not a thing. It's maybe a thing for some people, but it's a thing for straight people, gay people, trans people, whatever. So I think that Danny, because of Nia being so likable, people are trashing Jasmine when Jasmine in all of this is the only person I think who has a real point and has been egregiously wronged. Danny was sexually inappropriate with Melissa and her fiance. And as people pointed out, if the gender and sex dynamics were different and it was someone laying their hands on Janet, do you think for a second it would have just been brushed under the rug?
That would have been Nia. Imagine if like Jason did that to Nia.
Thank you. How do you think this season would have played? It would have been the storyline for the rest of the season. They probably would have come to blows over it. But because it's two gay women, Jasmine and Melissa, they're just supposed to laugh it off. And oh, he just grabbed my ass. And isn't that so cute? Fuck that. Absolutely not. They were fetishized. They were treated inappropriately. And I think that the last thing I want to say is that Jasmine, I believe, was legitimately triggered. And this is what people are missing. When you have a history of a woman, we don't know what her history is in terms of sexual abuse or anything like that. But when you are treated like this by someone who's supposed to love you and be a friend to you, and not only do they do it, but then they give you kind of a faux apology and then out of the other side of their mouth say, well, maybe you're over exaggerating or you're making me look bad. No,
wait,
honey bunny.
Did Danny do that?
Yes, he did.
Wait, when?
In the preview for the season, what do they call that when they do like this? They show what's to come. Mid-season trailer. Yes. Danny is seen confronting Jasmine about ruining his reputation. And that enrages me. And listen, I want to watch it, but this is not the first time Danny walks stuff back because what I will do is I watch a lot of Watch What Happens Live after these shows. So Danny will give an apology. It'll be a sincere apology. And then on Watch What Happens Live, he'll say, well, was it really that big of a deal? That's bullshit.
I see. Okay. I clearly missed the mid-season trailer.
Well, and listen, maybe that one part just really stuck out to me because it angered me, right? We see Danny have a second opportunity to apologize to women who he's wronged and who he should own his behavior for. And then all of a sudden it's like that stuck out to me. And I'm like, right, he's not sorry. He's just sorry it's a thing. And he just wants it to go away, which I understand that too.
I think what I will say in Danny's defense is that he did all of these apologies. Like he did have a conversation off camera, like before they started this up. And I think he's confused why 7 months later, 9 months later, it's being discussed again. And I think he probably thinks like, oh, this is for a storyline as opposed to like you're actually upset about it. Maybe. Right. I don't know. Because it is a long time. I mean, I think that's where he's coming from. And so then when he apologized again and he heard Jasmine explain why it was so hurtful, he was like, wow, I didn't really think of that. What I think the issue with Jasmine is that she's talking to everyone but Danny about it. And so
I disagree with that. She's talked to him a couple times though, you know, but
I mean, but this time she hadn't. She over the last 2 weeks or week that we've been like, they've been, do you know what I'm saying? Like she's while they're in Santa Barbara and she was clearly very triggered by seeing him drunk again. She talked to everyone and like really made a big deal out of it, which it is a big deal, but she didn't ever go back to him. And so he's only hearing about it from other people and is like, well, why? I thought we were fine. We talked, like, if we're not fine, then like, let me figure this out. But I think if you come to an agreement with someone, you're like, okay, we're moving beyond this, right? Like back when they talked back in, 2024 or whatever, or 2023, whenever this happened.
Yeah.
It feels like if you're going to like dig up the scab again, then you have to explain why and you have to go to that person rather than like, and I'm not saying that she's wrong in her feelings. I think how she went around it made it feel more gossipy than even though I think she was trying to do it to like process by talking about it. That's how she's processing it.
Yes, you're right.
But it's also,
but I see how that looks.
Probably like, why are you going to everyone if the problem is with me? I think she wasn't ready to bring the problem to him yet. She was wanting everyone to understand her point of view. So I see how
because she was, okay.
I don't think it's wrong. I just think I understand why he's confused. He's like, why is she going around talking about this? Like we had a conversation.
Right.
It sounds like she accepted my apology. And now it's being discussed again. What I think he doesn't understand is that getting drunk and her seeing him drunk again triggered that memory.
Exactly.
And I think that's what she said to him, basically, like watching you in this state really brought back. And that's what I think. And Jason said something really interesting on the after show. He said, listen, like if I had been through what Danny went through, like with that, doing that, like he goes, I would never drink again, but that's just me. And that is actually what I feel like is the appropriate response. Like if you get to a point where you actually sexually assault, grab someone and everyone's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. He was just drunk. And I'm like, no, like people get drunk all the time and don't do that.
That is what irritates me. Do not for 1 second say that getting blackout drunk and putting your hands on somebody in a sexual manner that they do not give consent for is not a big fucking deal. Don't you dare say that. That is what makes me crazy. Talk about internalized misogyny with some of these Bravo people who like the fans. That is
I think it's more about alcohol than it is about the like internalized misogyny. I think
I'm sure
all of them have issues with alcohol and they don't want to like acknowledge that maybe they drink too much. Jason said like what his intent was. I think he delivered it extremely poorly to Danny, and I'm glad that he apologized because it came from an extremely judgmental place that did not seem like he cared about either Jasmine's or Danny's well-being. Like he was just mad. Claims that he was trying to do was say, listen, like we are all drinking a little too much. Like maybe we should try doing some other activities, which is definitely not what he said or how it came across.
Yeah, and I think that Jason in that moment, you're right, he was really harsh with Danny, but his message was valid. Like Jason seems to be the only one who gets it. But it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. And he said it so badly. And I was like, ooh, even I'm not agreeing with you. And I totally agree with the fact that like Danny. And the thing is like, if you think he has an issue, but you're not actually trying to like help or express concern, then you're just trying to like get a gotcha moment over someone that like maybe struggles with something. And that's also doesn't come across great.
I think that what Jason was trying to do is get Danny to nail down some accountability, because I really still, my personal opinion, I still don't think he's done that. I think that people who are overutilizing a substance, unless they take time away from that or do some real work, it is very hard for them to truly see and understand their behavior and how it impacts other people, if I'm being honest. And I think that Jason is someone who sees Danny's drinking clearly and is saying, you know, like, hey guys on this cast, like Jax and Jesse and, you know, Danny, like, let's be good men here and understand the impact that our behaviors have. I think Jason's trying to elevate that, you know, like let's be good humans. But, you know, again, I think that as a human being, he just like got carried away with it, and it did feel really ugly. And I understood why Danny was upset. But I think Danny has this continual thing that I just recognize from doing what I've done for a long time, where his denial and his minimization is so loud, and it's so, he's so defensive, right? Like, when you're coming from such a defensive place, there's something about that for him. And I can't even begin to say what that is. I don't know him. I'm not his therapist, but I can see that piece where he's just like, he doesn't want to hear it. He wants to do what he's doing. He doesn't really want to change a lot, and he just wants everyone to be cool.
Yeah, and what he's doing, like, I just don't think it happens that often, right? Like, you see Jesse down 2 bottles of champagne prior to even going to a winery. And that is like a sign of a serious issue, right? Like, I think most people would agree, like, objectively, that like that amount of drinking at that time in the day before going to do more drinking is a sign of a problem. And I think they don't see the problem because Danny doesn't do it regularly. This was like a one-off. And I think what Jason is trying to say is, I don't think it's a one-off. I think even if it happens like twice a year, it's a problem. So just like maybe not drink. But again, you can't tell someone.
I know.
It's hard.
I know, but
yeah.
And I talked about this on my podcast, is that the biggest disservice that society does is telling people that binge drinking means that you can't be an alcoholic. And again, I'm not labeling anyone because that's not my job and it's not appropriate. But people, not all addicts look like Jax. Not all addicts look like that. Not all addicts are drinking every day, using every day. It's about what you're using, why you're using it, and how is this impacting my life? And so when you're looking at Danny, this has impacted his marriage. It's impacted his closest friendships. It may impact his employment, which is, I think, ultimately what Nia is so concerned about. Because what I think for Nia, it's about, if you've been unhoused chronically and you have this beautiful life now, what happens if Danny loses his job? I think her brain constantly goes to that scarcity trauma. And so I think her brushing it under the rug is more self-preservation. But listen, one thing I want to make sure we do get into, because we're running out of time. You had brought up something really interesting about something you saw on an after show about Michelle and Jesse and their birth story. We talked about it a little bit on yours, but I just wanted you to bring it up here too, because I thought it was so interesting.
Yeah, so I listened to Michelle's interview that she did on Nick Vile's podcast, and it really was the first time that I feel like I truly understood where she was coming from with things, because I just don't think she gets her point across very well on the show. It's not her fault. She's saying the right things. It's just the way she's saying it is not like landing the punch sometimes. And I mean, one of the things she did say was that her mother was dying throughout this summer. And the day after the Dave and Buster's scene, where she like kind of loses it and tries to get everyone to kind of vote him off the island, her mother had like surgery for cancer or something like that. So it's like, oh, I feel like we're not given the whole story if we don't know that she's dealing with something very traumatic at the same time, which alters your behavior. And it sounds like her father left the family when she was like 12 or 13, and he had a mental health issue. And then her mother has since passed away. So like, Jesse was making her life miserable during a time that she was losing the most important person in her life other than Isabella. And
he knew that.
And he knew that, right? And so that makes it so much like nastier that he was like fighting with her during this time.
Calling her a whore during the time that her mother's dying from cancer. Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, now I understand the anger. Because it's not just what he did. It's like what he did during this time. Like, I understand like where it's coming from. And then she also talks about how he really changed after she got pregnant. Not after she had the baby, but when she got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a guest on my podcast last week that said, how much do you want to bet that Jesse's life coach is going to finally make him realize that he had male postpartum, right? Or something like that. And I was like, well, male postpartum, that's like, it wasn't even after Isabella was born. It was while she was pregnant. She goes, yeah, that's because it was no longer about him. The focus wasn't on him.
Yes.
And so the thing that you were bringing up that I said is that Michelle confirmed that her situation of like giving birth was extremely difficult because Jesse was arguing with the nurses and doctors. At first, he didn't want her to have an epidural and she wanted to have an epidural. Then Isabella was not coming out quick enough and it was becoming dangerous for Isabella's health. And so they said, we need to use Pitocin and we need to induce. And he was like, well, I don't want that. And he thought it was his job to like control the environment in which he came, but he clearly didn't understand anything or respect like any of the choices that she had. And it makes sense. Like, she was very controlling and she kind of like was in that dynamic of being controlled. And what was the most wild was that this week, or last week, I guess by this point, on the Not Skinny But Not Fat podcast, Amanda Hirsch asks Jesse about this and he confirms that he was concerned about the environment in which his daughter was being born and wanted to know about. It's almost like he didn't say it, but like the blood-brain barrier, like if the drug is given to Michelle in her back, the epidural, like does that get into Isabella? Will she be born on drugs? Was sort of what he was saying. And it's like, why are you, like, you can have these questions. The time to ask is not when your wife is in active labor and they're trying to have a healthy birth. The time for questions like that is during the visits that you should have been going to while Michelle was with the OBGYN saying, hey, I just have some questions about this. I don't really understand what an epidural is.
But it's also that he's not asking, he's telling. And this is the part about Jesse's psyche that bothers me, is that people who think that they know more than they do, that's wild. He has a lot of ego, thinking that you know better than the doctors, the nurses who do this for a freaking living, who have gone to school, who have had clinical practice. Jesse fucking Lally knows better than that. And he knows better than his wife, who it's her body and she's experiencing it. It's just such a wild story and it speaks so much to Jesse. But you know what I want, and the hypocrisy too is that, so Jesse is so quote unquote worried about that, which I don't think he was. I just think it was control. And you know what he might want to worry about more is how calling the mother of his child a whore on TV over and over and over again might impact his child. Fuck the blood-brain barrier. Forget the epidural, which, by the way, women do you booze, okay? No one is going to make anyone feel bad for doing something that you need to do in childbirth. Maybe Jesse should really take some stock and worry about how that may impact his child.
It's so funny. I had a situation, I hope people don't figure out who I'm talking about, but last summer where I was doing an event on Capitol Hill and it was related to Father's Day, and we had a member of Congress that was slated to come and talk about being a dad. Like a few weeks before he was slated to come, it turned out that he had an affair. Anyways, I'm not going to say with who because then it will give it away. But
okay.
It was with another member of Congress.
Neat. Great.
And I know, drama. And I'm like, we were trying to figure out, like, we can't, do we uninvite him? Like, what do we do? Mm-hmm. And I was talking to my dad about it because this happened while I was, I think, at home or visiting, with my dad. And I said, well, like, it's not really impacting like how he is as a father, right? Like, he could be a good father, but a bad husband. And my dad said, right. No, that's not how it works. He was like, in order to be a good father, you need to respect the mother, whether
Correct.
Or not you're together.
Correct. That's
He's
absolutely
like, that's part
correct.
of being a good father.
Yes.
And I was like,
uh-huh.
You're right.
But the bar for men sometimes is so low that it's like, oh, you're a good dad. And it's like, no, he's not being a good dad by how he's disrespecting. Because if people do not think that children see, hear, feel intuitively.
And repeat
Right. And it impacts their little psyches in terms of them processing who is my parent, who is my mother, who is my father. It creates more problems than Pitocin is going to create having her come out of the birth canal.
One thing I will say, not in Jesse's defense, but I am uncomfortable with how Isabella has spoken to Michelle about like, it's okay that your first marriage didn't work out. You can just marry Aaron. Like that means that she is having conversations or that Isabella is witnessing conversations that is not appropriate for her at that age to like worry about her mother's love life. Like that's
and who
she's
knows
4.
though, that could be coming from Jesse too. We don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah.
So before we wrap, is it okay if we talk about the Imrul piece just really quick? Okay. So we didn't talk about Summer House because to me, I think we talked about on part 1 on your podcast, but also it was just like, it was such a snooze fest. Literally. The bedbug set was so cute. But it was a snooze fest in terms of this was the reunion that should have happened last year. In my opinion, it was way too much time on West and Sierra and Jesse and Lexi. But we got a lot of interesting information about Sierra and her family, which I know we don't have a ton of time to talk about. But the Imrul piece, basically what Imrul said was that he got painted with this orgy beast brush. What I appreciated is he kind of owned ways that maybe he leaned into it or shied away from showing other parts of himself. But the sad part is that his family, who they are Muslim, I believe, had such an issue with what happened on the show that he was disinvited to his nephew's birthday party.
Yeah, it was his in-laws.
In-laws. Okay, thank you.
His brother's in-laws.
Okay.
So not even his in-laws. So it's not like his immediate family because his parents were still in Bangladesh. And then since that reunion had taped, his father actually passed.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so Kyle was circulating. I don't know if it was a GoFundMe, but it was like specifically to donate to the charity that Imrul had set up, like in honor of his dad. And I think a lot of the cast was like sharing that as a way to honor Imrul's father. So I donated.
Well, I will now too. And honestly, I will post as well because, no expectations from people. But I feel like it's if that's what he's asking, I feel like that's the least I can do.
It's, I mean, obviously way more personal to him than to me, but I did live in Bangladesh before, and it is a country I very much love. And I love the people. I love the culture. But it is a country that has been through a lot since it became a country in 1971. And it has had a lot of extreme challenges. There's a lot of very extreme poverty. Right. And there's a lot of struggles there. And there's a lot of work to educate the population and especially educate girls, which is really, really important. And so one of the things that Imrul did is set up a school there, and he's helping.
Oh, I love
so that was the charity.
Okay.
And so his parents were back, his mother still lives there. So he would go back and travel often. And he's like setting up the charity to fund this school in a rural, very poor rural area.
And
so I spent,
everything you're saying, it shows that Imrul, I think he got a dirty edit. Now, he played a part in that, right? But there was so much more to him, right? That's rich. That's the kind of stuff that I want to hear about, that I want to know about, how these things impacted his relationships with his family, public perception. I just find that so fascinating. So I appreciate you bringing that piece because I didn't even know about that.
Yeah. And but the thing is that Lexi said, I wish we asked you more questions.
Yeah.
Because it was like, I do think when you lead with sex and you bring strangers home and you're new, that does make people uncomfortable, especially the women in the house. I think we're like truly uncomfortable with it. And it makes you make assumptions. Like, and it's the same thing when anyone leads with sex. Right? It's like, okay, is that all you care about? Like what else is going on here? And for me, I was thinking there may be an issue because it felt so like compulsive and weird that he was taking time on the weekend when he's working, filming a show. I'm like, he could just be doing that during the week. Like, I'm like, what are you doing during the week if this is what you're doing? Like, how often is this happening? And he made it sound like he was more just like kind of not that into threesomes, and he was more like kind of a newbie to some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But the one thing I will say about Bangladesh is I learned very early on that the repression that people have felt growing up there comes out in different ways. And the only time I have ever been at a party when there was like swingers was in Bangladesh, because people are forced into marriages, arranged marriages, very young,
Right.
and they don't get to explore sexually. And so that is an opportunity for couples to explore sexually without breaking the marriages.
Right. In ways that they never were able to individually before.
And that was a shock. I was like, wait, I'm in this like Muslim country where it's like supposed to be dry, like there's not supposed to be any alcohol. And like within the first night, I'm at a party at a Western hotel with alcohol and drugs and people wearing skimpy outfits. And I am like,
you're like, wow.
Like, I was such an idiot, but I was so young, you know, like I like brought like, I don't even know if I brought jeans because I thought maybe one pair, because I thought I would have to wear like a salwar kameez the whole time and not, which is what I wore like at work. That was like appropriate.
Sure.
But like on the weekend, you can wear what you want. And no one's like, yeah, you want to be modest, but like as a Westerner, no one's like expecting you to wear.
Right.
But like I thought that's what was like appropriate. There's like so many interesting, you know, I was very young, but yeah, and it was really cool.
This ties back in too, you know, as we're wrapping this up, to what we talked about at the top of the podcast, right? Which is when you have cultures, religions, and societies where things are very strict. And it's like, well, this is a natural part of human behavior, but you can't do it. People are going to find ways around that because we're humans. Well, you know, we'll make mistakes and we have sex and we experiment, we do these things. And the shame piece of it, whether it's, you know, religion or society, it does create this fervor around these behaviors where it takes a behavior that's totally normal and makes it become taboo. And then that can become a problem in and of itself. And so I think Imrul was a little bit of a victim of that. So I would love to see a little bit more from him. But, you know, thank you, Mandy, so much for being here today. We always can never stop talking, and I feel like we missed 100 million things. Don't worry, we're going to keep doing these M&M hours, because even on my breaks, Mandy and I are doing M&M hours, and I'm just going to post them to my Patreon. So please, Mandy, let everybody know where they can find you in part 1.
Thanks so much. So you can find my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's called Is This Real Life with Mandy Slutsker. And that's spelled slut, S-K-E-R. If you type in Mandy, spelled the correct way with the Y, and then slut, you can find me in pretty much any place. And you can follow me on Instagram at Mandy Slutsker, where I post clips of the podcast. And yeah, that's about it.
Yep. And please tune in for part 1. We had a great discussion. We talked a little bit more Summer House on part 1. So if you're interested in that, I mean, we just, you know, we covered a whole gambit of things today. We podcasted for so long, and yet I feel like we could do 3 more hours. That is the beauty of us. So for everyone listening today, thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding that this is going to be the season finale. If you want to hear me on my breaks, Patreon is where you will find me. It is between $5 to $15 per month. Ad free, you get full video, you get the whole shebang. And while I'm on my breaks, I do specific episodes for subscribers, which, to be honest, they tend to be a little bit more personal, because I feel a little bit safer there. I feel a little bit more free from judgment. And I just feel like, you know, the people there they're my peeps. They understand me. And so for all of you who are in that, whether you're Spreaker supporters on Patreon and Instagram, thank you. I adore you. And so tune into my Bite-Sized Bish for just a little wrap up of the season. And thank you, Mandy, as always. And I can't wait to do 1 million more of these, my dear.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Love to you and yours. And ta-ta until next season. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Great Heart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT Podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, hear on YBT Podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.